Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. I talk a lot on my channel about the state of audiences today and how we're not consuming stories responsibly. But I wanted to talk a little bit specifically, if this is the state of audiences today, then how do you write for that type of audience? Now, this video is not only going to be of interest, though, to writers. I think it's of interest to anybody who's interested in the state of storytelling today, how to, why their shows or why their movies or why their books or whatever are becoming, you know, uh, certain ways and certain formulas and whatnot, state of it. But writers will certainly uh, do well to heed some of this because it used to be, and I think, that when the industry changes, parts of it are kind of slow, they lag behind. It used to be that to be a writer, to be a published writer of fiction, you had to write a novel. There's just no way around it. Oh, that's cute. You write some short stories. Okay, that's in preparation for writing your novel. That was the way it was. If you were a short story writer and you wanted to make it, you had to get some short stories published in various publications. And if those publications were of enough, repute, then maybe you could interest another publisher into compiling them and sending out publishing a compilation of your short stories. And then if that did well enough, you could maybe do some get some credit, be seen as a writer, a published writer. If you were a novelist, you honed your draft until it was either of interest to an agent or a publisher, and then that was published. And if it did well enough, then you were a writer. You read like biographies of people like Stephen King, and just it's a wonderful. In many ways, it's great how that worked, but gone are those days. Those days are gone. Now, this was all before, of course, the advent of self-publishing and the technology that we have now to just be our own distribution services and everything. And there are pluses and minuses to that. The big minus is that there's no longer, I mean, the plus is there's no longer gatekeepers, but the minus is that there's no longer gatekeepers in terms of quality. You don't have any kind of quality control or quality check. So if you purchase a self-published anything, book, comic, short stories, even a movie, you don't know that the quality's there. You don't know how much the writer has, or the filmmakers or whatever have gone through the process of draft revising and really getting feedback and honing this into something good. So, what do you do as a writer in this current industry? Well, the biggest thing I said that the novel what used to be the thing. While some pockets of the industry might still privilege a novel because they think it's more marketable, they can get more bang for their buck and stuff like that. Uh, the audiences simply don't have the attention spans to read novels anymore. If you find people who can still sit down and just focus long term on a single story, then those people are most likely geeks. But gone are the days even of geek culture being all about that. I mean, even within geek culture, the people are just unable to focus that long. And there have been brain studies on how our brains are evolving with the technology that we have today. And studies have shown that our brains, and not your brain, my brain, just in brains in general, especially with each new generation as it grows up with this kind of technology, is it evolves a bit and it loses the capability to sit there and focus on something long term, whether that's a book, movie, or whatever. And I've said, even when I try and show movies in my classes, that used to be a fun day, when I was growing up, sweet movie day, and we would all just, get sucked in and watch the movie. But now students groan when it looks like I'm going to show a movie because they just, oh, I'm not going to be able to sit here and pay attention to this story. Like one story, are you kidding me? And just it keeps going, and there's no, yeah, and you'll hear, as I said before, you'll hear students say things like, well, I just prefer TV shows because, or now I just prefer TikTok because 15 seconds is about all I got attention span for. I need something new. Um, so what do you do as a writer with that? Well, first let me get back to the brain study. So they discovered that we're losing that, but the reason that brains are losing the ability to focus long term is because they've had to alter and gain the ability to multitask. And that's not always a good thing. Multitask meaning that you need to kind of keep track of a few different things at the same time. You're not going to master any of those things that you're keeping track of at the same time, but you can kind of keep abreast of a few different things. And you can, that's the smartphone world, right? Where you're writing a status while you're looking at a news feed, while you're kind of looking at that funny video that someone sent you, and maybe you're going back and forth in between, maybe you're doing them at the same time. And that's bad for brains in one sense, and people will tell you, it's going to hurt the quality of your work. But in another, just to be fair, within our world today, I mean, with all the demands, I mean, just my own life, I work from home, which is a lot easier. But teaching from home, I'm teaching my classes, I'm chasing my daughter, I'm worrying about this or that, I'm going to check on my mother, I'm, all this kind of stuff going on. So it's, it's useful to be able to multitask, even though you're not going to do something of greater quality. So, how does this apply to the writer? Well, I'm a big fan. Novels are still wonderful, and people should still write novels. They're great. I think they need to be marketed in a certain way. Genre novels are going to do better because there's already a ready-made audience that is more skilled and more used to sitting down and reading something long form. I think if you write a novel, though, you need to start looking into, first of all, you need to pay very close attention to concise chapter arcs, because the average novel reader today, because of their capability or just because of their schedule, gone is the day when you can just sit down and spend an afternoon reading a novel. If you can actually still do that in your life, you are blessed, and I'm envious. But I can't do that. I'm scheduled too busy. I'm chasing my daughter around the days I have her, seeing to all her needs. She's special needs, and then the days that she's with her mother, I'm usually catching up on my own work that I wasn't able to do because I had her and whatnot. So yeah, it's because of schedule or because of inability to focus, novel readers do not sit down and just read a whole novel for the most part. So you pay attention to the chapter arcs. Is this chapter that I get to the end of this chapter? First of all, are they shorter chapters? Are they more consumable in a short amount of time? And that's an easy thing to do. Even if your story is very long form novel wise, it's easy to make sure the chapters are a little smaller and make sure the readers feel like when they come to an end of a chapter, they have closed out a little arc. No, they don't need to know how the whole story ends by the end of chapter 3 or anything, but when you come to the end of a chapter, you do feel some sense of completion as to what went on in that chapter. You don't know all the answers, you don't know all the, where the story's going. There's still lots to come, and you're excited about that, you're tantalized, but you do feel a little sense of accomplishment. Okay, at least I made it to the end of this chapter right now. I can pick up another chapter later when I have the time. That helps readers. It'll help readers come back to your work if you're a long form storyteller like a novelist or something like that. There's pitfalls to that, though. And one of the things we see in television and novels and whatnot, or comics, for example, is this writing to a cliffhanger. This over reliance on a cliffhanger is a problem because where you should be giving a satisfying completion to an end of an arc and also a hint or a little tease about something to come, give a mystery there, sure. Don't just rely on nothing but a cliffhanger. If you do that and you keep readers coming back for cliffhanger after cliffhanger after cliffhanger, it'll work short term, but they'll be quite frustrated with you. This is why when you look back at a show like Lost, it's garbage. Immensely popular in its day. The remake of Battlestar Galactica, immensely uh, popular in its day, and you'll still have people, trying to, kind of revel in the nostalgia of that. But looking back on the long form story, it's simply not a good constructed story. It's not well constructed. It's not well composed because they were just writing to the cliffhangers with no real insight in mind. So you didn't have integrity of plot, integrity of progression, and of overall tension. So don't fall into the pitfall of just trying to write to a cliffhanger and failing to write, satisfying arcs that will ultimately culminate in the end satisfying arc of the story. Whether that's a novel, whether that's a comic book series, whether that's a web series, whatever it is. I am a big fan of short stories, but even they've evolved. So I love Edgar Allan Poe. He's one of my own kind of personal mentors, in terms of writing, because he was obviously a wonderful fiction writer, a wonderful poet, but he was also, quite a known critic in his day. And he wrote wonderful things about writing fiction and poetry and whatnot. And one of the things he said in his day is he didn't like the novel. The novel is technically it came kind of late in the game in the history of literature. Novels, even once we had the technology to publish a long form story like that and mass produce it, novels still didn't really take on. They were relatively new. Short stories are poems and epics and stuff like that, would take place. But he was a big fan of short stories because he said that you need to have unity of effect in a story. Now, novels can achieve this in different ways, like I said, with the arc completions, mini arcs in the chapters and so forth. But he said you need to have a unity of effect. And in order for all of the language and all of the things that happen in the short story to really achieve this one effect that you want to achieve in the reader, it has to be short enough for them to read in one single sitting. As soon as they have to put the story down and go answer the door, or put the story down and go tend to dinner or whatever, they lose that momentum. They lose that effect that you're building up. And this is something specific to short stories. My favorite quote about short stories is Stephen King said, talking about novels, and he said, short stories are something different. They're like a kiss from the dark and a kiss from a stranger in the dark. I love that. That is a good short story that can really just reach out and slap you in the face. And they're like, where did that come from? It's like out of nowhere. You just been hit with something that's so well crafted for effect. So Poe said that it has to be read in one sitting, which I think is very true. But if you look at some of Poe's short stories, they're quite long by today's standards because the culture's changed. In his day, people could sit and focus on things more. They probably had the time. They weren't watching TV at the end of the day. They were reading. So what do you do as a short story writer today for the increased the lowing attention spans and so forth? Well, I myself am I've specialized in what I call writing the tale. This is something that I specialize in my MFA program, and I've taught classes, gave lectures on it. And the tale is no more than about 10 pages long, a double spaced manuscript. Very short, very concise, no more than 10 pages. And it's a and now since it's a tale, it's something more like a Twilight Zone or something like that, an anthology type series where you're not building greater arcs and putting B plots in motion and C plots in motion to come out later in the long run. You're really just focusing on this event that happened in one person's life one day. There's usually, as Aristotle says, for good drama, this applies to the tale writing too. You need to have unity of time, unity of place. It can be a little bit more vignettes. I've written stories that break that unity of time rule because they're more sort of vignettes. But if they're going to break the unity of time and cover a large space of time in one person's life, then they need to be very specific in the theme and just explore this theme in this person's part of this life and then explore that same theme when they're a few years older and see how that's tracking or progressing. That's something that you should probably be a little more skilled before you try something like that, though. A good rule of thumb to starting the tale is unity of time, unity of place, unity of effect, as Poe says there. And I've found that tales are far easier to get readers invested. You can do them in a short video. You can read them. You can present them. Put graphics to them if you want. You can read them publicly. They're short enough where you're not going to lose the audiences, especially if you've written them tightly enough and honed them with revision enough to the language and everything is really gripping people there. They actually will hold an audience who's used to story because they're not having to sit there and just really, put aside their cares and really zone into a long form story. So the tale is quite well done. And it also teaches writing the tale can help you get better at those short little chapter arcs too. It's a good practice for novel writers. The tale can in many ways inform the novel. I should probably do another video just on the art of the tale in general. So these videos are short, and I want to keep this short. So just sort of to recap, what can writers learn or what can writers remember about writing for today's audiences? Well, as I said, if you want to be a novel writer, at least make sure your novels are divided up by shorter chapters with satisfying arcs of some sort. Something at least gets resolved in the chapter. Something, doesn't have to be much, doesn't have to really advance the plot too much if you want to save this for later or whatever, but some kind of complete arc has to be there. And if you're writing for any sort of shorter form, like a web series, a comic, or short stories, I really recommend trying to shorten your stories as much as possible. Pay attention to unity of effect. It's a good, even if you can effectively write without unity of time or unity of place. And what I mean by that is that the story takes place within a certain set time, like these 12 hours or this 1 hour. Unity of place, you don't leave the setting or something like that. Even if you can effectively write stories that break that, it's still a really useful discipline to try to write within that. Try to write a story that takes place within 12-hour period in one place or two places tops or something like that. That's good honing. It's good practice for as a writer. And you'll find that if you can write little tales like that, even if you really want to write this novel, start writing tales that take place in the universe of your novel. It's good practice. It helps you flesh out the universe of your novel, and it's a tool for marketing because you can get people interested in the stories you just wrote, these little well-crafted tales that are engaging to the readers, and then that can get them curious so that by the time you're ready to market to them a long-form novel, then it's, oh, okay, yeah, I remember this place. Oh, I want to visit this place again, this universe of your novel. That's good marketing, so good things to take into effect. Also, don't think, another pitfall, and I'll end with this, a little out of order, but don't think that just because you have chopped up the chapters or the episodes shorter, that you can still just let the long form flow. This is what Book of Boba Fett did, and this is why the average audiences looked at that and thought, this is so boring, because nothing really advanced. The episode ended at the right episode time, but nothing really felt complete or arced or resolved, So that's another pitfall. But I'm kind of rambling at this point. Maybe I'll do another video just on the tale itself, but I just wanted to get a few of those thoughts out there. So you can let me know if you have any questions or if there's aspects of this you'd like me to do a fuller video on. I'd be happy to. But until next time, keep enjoying, digging deeper, and writing the hero stories you love best. Thanks for watching.